1 minute to live, 1 minute.
Hi, Councillor Stewart. Oh,
And
are
we're
you able
live
to
in 9,
tilt your camera down, Bill? We can only see the top of your head.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you're up.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to this regular meeting of the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Kincardine, 5 o'clock on June 5th, 2023, here at the Municipal Administration Center. We begin with roll call. Deputy Mayor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Blackwell.
Present.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Present.
Councillor Hinchberger.
Present.
Councillor Kennedy. Present. Councillor Kennedy. You already said that. Councillor Pranger.
Present.
Councillor Steinhoff Gray. Councillor Stewart. Councillor Stewart, can you turn on your microphone, please? We know that he's here. Okay, just like to comment that Councillors Blackwell and Stewart are attending remotely. We also welcome our staff members and a number in our audience as well. Good evening. Councillor Kennedy, the land acknowledgement, please.
Hey, we would like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional lands and territory of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, which includes the Chippewas of Nawash, unceded First Nation, and the Chippewas of Saugeen First Nation, whose ancestors were the first to inhabit, care for, and live on this land. We recognize and deeply appreciate the contributions that Indigenous peoples have made, both in caring for this land and shaping and strengthening this community, our province, and our country. As a public service organization, we are dedicated to learning and acknowledging Indigenous history and culture, and are committed to actions that move us towards a journey of truth, healing, and reconciliation with the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, the Métis Nation of Ontario, and the historic Saugeen Métis.
Thank you, Councillor. And certainly this is Indigenous Awareness Month as well too. So we appreciate the ongoing work that particularly our Manager of Strategic Initiatives guides us along in that process of reconciliation and cultural awareness. And we'll have likely opportunity in our announcements this evening to remember some of those dates that we'll be looking forward to in June. Are there any amendments, additions, or deletions to the agenda package? Seeing none. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. If you have a pecuniary interest, if you would declare it now or as it arises in the meeting. Were there any registrants for the public forum?
Sorry.
And there are not. We have the adoption of minutes from regular and special meetings of council. Clerk, please.
This is moved by Andrea Clark, seconded by Rory Kavanaugh, that the minutes of the council meetings held on May 15th, 2023 be adopted as printed.
So you've heard the motion. Is there any discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Any notice of motions? We do have some motions here that we'll address now. We have one regarding the Westario Power Inc. shareholders meeting.
Oh.
Councillor Blackwell.
Sorry, thank you. I'm just following along my agenda. Did I miss 6, the presentations and petitions section?
Oh, so we did. Absolutely. Why, thank you. No wonder we were going so quickly. My apologies to have overlooked that. Presentations and petitions. We do have the petition regarding the Birchwood Trail from the Kinhuron subdivision. Is there someone to present that, or have we just acknowledged that we received it? Okay, acknowledge that we receive it. And there will be a more fulsome discussion regarding that issue once, just as our CAO has indicated, when we get the completed legal opinions for some of the land divisions down there. 7.2 Westario Power Inc. shareholders meeting. Clerk, please.
A move by Rory Kavanagh, seconded by Doug Kennedy, that Council of the Municipality of Kincardine hereby appoint Kenneth Craig, Mayor, and Gillian Belchamber Glazier, Chief Administrative Officer, as a Westario Power Inc. shareholder, and vote on behalf of the Council of the Municipality of Kincardine at the 2023 Annual General Meeting.
You've heard the motion. Is there any discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Prince Edward County's Resolution 2023-294 regarding declaring intimate partner violence an epidemic. Moved by Jennifer Prenger, and we need a seconder for that motion, seconded by Councillor Hinchberger. And it is that the municipality of Kincardine support Prince Edward County's Resolution 2023-294 regarding declaring intimate partner violence an epidemic. Is there any discussion?
Thank you through your chair. I brought this forward just it's something that I think is very important, and unfortunately, I believe the pandemic has really intensified this. Family violence in general has gone up every year since 2019, and currently every 6 days, one woman is killed by her partner in Canada. So I fully support Prince Edward County's motion and hope we can too, as well as support our local women's house, which I've been in contact with actually, and we'll be bringing that to council in the future soon. Thank you.
Anything further? All in favor of the motion? And that's carried. Consideration of bylaws, 8.1 Code of Conduct bylaw. Clerk, please.
Moved by Beth Blackwell, seconded by Bill Stewart, that the Code of Conduct for members of council and local boards policy bylaw be deemed to be read a first, second, and third time, finally passed, numbered as bylaw 2023-085.
Heard the resolution. Is there any discussion? Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. I have 2 possible amendments. I can't figure out how to get my screen going here. The first is I would really like to figure out a way to ensure that it's overtly clear that this applies to committee members as well. It was recommended on the strategy core document and later on that they said to amend the code of for council, local boards, and committee members. I don't know whether that's necessary or not, but I do feel that I've had some discussions and I just really want to make it very clear. The second piece was around
Councillor, how would you recommend rectifying that first issue?
So whether or not we just change the title to include that, I'll through you perhaps chat with the CAO about whether that's appropriate, or whether there's another way to. I think we're planning to share it with our committee members. Is that correct?
Certainly we will. So it could be that you would propose an amendment to the name of this code of conduct?
If that's appropriate, it is something that I just really want to make overtly clear.
Your second recommendation, please.
Sure. So my second recommendation relates to 9.3, which is when council can or cannot discriminate against folks. One of the language in that is that a member shall not conduct or make comments in any manner that is discriminatory to any individual based on the individual's record of offenses for which a pardon has not been granted. And I'd like a bit of clarity perhaps on where that language has come from or how that may limit us, because if we're appointing people to positions of public trust, I could see potentially a record of offense of which a pardon hasn't been granted could perhaps influence whether or not we feel comfortable with that appointment. So I'm just not sure whether perhaps that section could be taken out or clarified in some way.
Anything else, Councillor Blackwell?
No, I think that's all for now. Thank you.
Can I refer to our clerk? Councillor Blackwell did have conversation with our clerk, but she wanted to raise it during the council meeting as well. So do you want to respond to the councillor's concerns, please?
So I will say through you, I will say two things. First of all, committees of council are considered a local board. And there has been some legal cases that have proven that out. So that's why it was left with local boards. But if you want to make it absolutely clear that it also applies to our committees so that it's, we can certainly do that by adding it to the name and specifically adding committees to the definition of local board. The second point, the code of conduct that we're using is one that is being used currently by our Integrity Commissioner, Aird Bairless, and they're the ones who recommended the line about for which a pardon has not been granted. That does come directly from the Human Rights Tribunal. But if council wishes to remove that section, then they're more than welcome to do that as well.
So we have the bylaw presented before us, and is there anyone who would like to make an amendment to the code of conduct? Well, we have options here. If we make those amendments, one is the name of the code of conduct itself, so it would include committees. The second would be to, we already have in the bylaw the stipulation where there's a person convicted of a criminal offense where a pardon has not been extended. So there's two considerations there. If anyone would like to make an amendment to the code of conduct for one or the other or both, we can consider it, or we can refer it back to staff for clarification, and we would address it likely in 2 weeks when we have our next council meeting. So I need a recommendation from council. If you think the amendments are significant, then perhaps we should defer. If you think they are not significant, then we make a minor amendment, but we proceed under your direction. Councillor Kavanaugh, please.
Thank you, and through the chair, I have no problems with the first proposed amendment, adjusting the name to include specifically committees to add clarification. So I have no problems sponsoring that and pushing it forward to something that could be completed tonight.
Is there any direction regarding the second proposal? Deputy Mayor Clark, please.
I would have some concerns about that. It comes directly from the Human Rights Commission. And whilst I hear what Councillor Blackwell says, it is simply one aspect. I think when you're considering committee members, you're looking at everything on a whole. And I think there's clear guidance with the Ontario Human Rights Commission about you take into consideration whether that would have a real impact or a real effect. So I would have issues with the second one.
So what I think I've just heard from council is to propose an amendment to the code of conduct bylaw to expand the name to include council, local boards and committee members. And also to retain the phrase in there regarding appointments to committees, certainly not discriminating on anyone's based on criminal conviction where there's not been a pardon extended. All right, so I would offer that as the, do you want to reread that motion, please, just so that we're clear on what we're addressing here, please,
So it
Claire?
would be that the code of conduct for members of council, local boards and committee members, policy bylaw be deemed to be read a first, second and third time, finally passed and numbered as bylaw 2023-085.
So it's moved and seconded. Is there any more discussion? All in favor of the motion? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. Council and staff relations policy bylaw. Clerk, please.
This is moved by Jennifer Prenger, seconded by Mike Hinchberger, that the council's and staff relations policy bylaw be deemed to be read a first, second and third time, finally passed and numbered as bylaw 2023-086.
For the motion, any discussion? All in favor? And anyone opposed? That's carried. Brucedale Community Center 2023 agreement bylaw. Clerk, please.
It's moved by Rory Kavanagh, seconded by Amanda, oh, no, what? Seconded by Beth Blackwell. That the Brucedale Community Center 2023 agreement bylaw be deemed to be read a first, second and third time, finally passed and numbered as bylaw 2023-087.
For the motion, any discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. 9.0, move into committee of the whole.
Moved by Doug Kennedy, seconded by Beth Blackwell, that council move into committee of the whole and upon completion, return to council.
All in favor? And that's carried. All right, I'd like to call this committee of the whole meeting of the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of Kincardine to order at 5:16 on June 5th. And the roll call remains the same. Are there any amendments, additions, or deletions to the proposed agenda? And once again, I'd remind you to disclose any pecuniary interest now or as it arises in the meeting. Councillor Kavanagh, please.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, just jumping ahead to 8.1B, request for noise bylaw exemption. I have to declare a pecuniary interest as my wife, Dr. Angela Kavanagh, be one of the doctors that is rocking and will be requiring the noise exemption. So I'll be stepping out for that one. Thank you.
Seems to me that if Councillor Kennedy had his way, we would all be there. So I'm not sure who's going to vote on this, on that noise bylaw. Yes. Adoption of the minutes of our committee of the whole meeting from May 15th. Clerk, please.
Okay, so this is moved by Bill Stewart, seconded by Jennifer Prenger.
That the minutes of the May 15th meeting be adopted as printed. Any discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. All right, we have this evening a delegation from Kincardine Pride, and I'd like to welcome with pride a spokesman Fort Papalia. Come on up. Welcome, Fort. How are you this evening? So I'm sure that our clerk has given you the egg timer thing, 10 minutes, and then we pull the plug on you. Is that okay? Thanks.
Where is the time? Okay, hi. Thank you. I'm president of Kincardine Pride, and I've been a Kincardine resident for 44 years now. Thank you very much for the honor of speaking to you on behalf of Kincardine Pride, and I will be very happy to take any questions and comments afterwards. As we enter Pride Month, I think it is very important to recognize how support for Pride initiatives are vital to advancing Kincardine as a strong, progressive community where one's neighbors, friends, family, and visitors feel safe, respected, and valued, regardless of their gender expression or who they love. As our community's elected leaders, you shape the vision and culture of our community. So your support and allyship is of utmost importance. In 2016, the Kincardine News's headline read, "London street preachers bring anti-LGBT message to Kincardine." The article described how people on the street were called homophobic slurs and misogynistic names, and many people phoned the police to report these strangers. Until then, I had never been to any pride parade or event, but I was appalled that while most of Canada celebrated pride, inclusiveness, and diversity, Kincardine, the home of my family and friends, might be thought of as some homophobic rural outpost, and I wondered how to respond to this. Soon afterwards, I asked my theater colleague and friend, Sandy Blackwood, what she thought of having a pride parade here, and she immediately said, "Let's go for it, even if it's only the two of us." Hopefully, some bullied or isolated youth will see us with our pride flag and feel that they have allies and are not alone. Prior to this, I had never seen any public representation, reference, or discussion of pride or gender-related issues anywhere here, and I myself knew little about many of these issues. Publicly, it seemed as though gender diverse people didn't exist here, but people we knew and loved had endured years of bullying, harassment, and threats, especially in their youth. So we set out to promote Kincardine as an LGBTQ inclusive community where everyone who wanted to could show their support for their unjustly treated fellow citizens. Since our first request to the municipality in 2017 to raise the rainbow flag, the municipality of Kincardine has flown it each year during Pride Month, and since then has also raised the flags that include the representation of transgender persons and people of color. Kincardine joined with most cities and towns across our province and nation in recognition and celebration of Pride Month. Like a lighthouse beacon, these flags signify that Kincardine is a safe harbor, a welcome shelter to people who are often on guard for their own safety, unsure as to how they will be treated, wondering if they will be judged, harassed, bullied, or rejected, as many in our town have been in the past, and some continue to be by their own families, classmates, co-workers, or friends. I have received many messages from former residents of Kincardine who say that they wish Kincardine Pride had existed when they lived here, as it would have made them feel recognized and that they belong. Here's a comment on a recent Facebook post where I showed the Rainbow and Every Child Matters crosswalks. An enormous thank you to the folks who made this happen and the residents who actively support it. The teenage boy who grew up in Kincardine is feeling seen and loved right now. Thank you. The rainbow flag flying at municipal sites says that you, our community leaders, recognize that there have been historical injustices done to members of the LGBTQ+ community here and across our country, that we are all working to ensure the safety and dignity of our community members through our local government, and it demonstrates that our elected representatives are committed to listening, learning, and taking positive action towards creating more inclusive and accessible spaces, services, and resources. Pride supportive policies and actions are incorporated into the missions of many of our local organizations who are sponsors, allies, and participants in our Pride Parade and celebration. These include Bruce Power, the Grey Bruce Labor Council, the Lions Club, the Ross Firm Lawyers, TD Bank, Armo Wind, EPCOR, ACON, NPX, Bruce Telecom, the BIA, the Chamber of Commerce, South Bruce OPP, where we had the honor of being at their flag raising this morning. Both teachers' unions, the Kincardine Independent, the Kincardine News, Shoreline Classics, progressive political parties and church groups, Rogers TV, and both local school boards. Something as a former teacher for the Bruce Grey Catholic School Board, I never thought I would ever see. We have supported Kincardin's efforts towards building an inclusive, diverse, and equitable community. We have also assisted with founding a local PFLAG chapter, which supports parents and families of gender diverse children and youth. We have advocated for improved healthcare, educational, and family supports. We have hosted numerous social events in partnership with local businesses. We have facilitated Rainbow Camp participation for local youth, sponsored Black History Month programs for both our school boards. We have been invited to participate in many committees, meetings, and community events in partnership with many community organizations. We collaborate with and share information with other Pride groups, information about our community, Kincardine. We have made the news in the Toronto Star with an article by our own Tammy Schneider. We've been on CTV, many local radio stations, newspapers, event and travel sites. We have been referenced by the Globe and Mail, the Ontario Grain Farmer magazine, and we've been named by Flair magazine as one of Canada's small but mighty Pride organizations in only our third year. We have brought thousands of people to our downtown shopping area, supporting food and accommodation providers, gas stations, general merchandise, sellers, tourism-related products, and we have put tens of thousands of dollars directly into our local economy by purchasing merchandise and advertising and co-hosting events with business partners where all are welcome. With fear for personal safety, lack of representation, services, and resources that are important to the 2S LGBTQ+ community, Kincardine risks losing their youth and families who need these vital supports. Further, the absence of a fully inclusive, safe, and welcoming community would be an obstacle to many who might consider coming to Kincardine for employment, shopping, festivals, entertainment, retirement, or vacation. We at Kincardine Pride are calling on you to continue to support our efforts and your own by flying the Pride flags, expanding visible representations such as crosswalks, street banners, window decals, hosting inclusiveness training, education, and awareness programs, having a vibrant idea committee, ensuring that groups using municipal locations follow inclusiveness guidelines, and continue to support our efforts in planning and organizing our Pride Parade and 2S LGBTQ+ celebration. We at Kincardine Pride believe that inclusiveness and diversity are and will continue to be our community's strengths, and that here in Kincardine, love always wins. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ford. We have appreciated the dedicated service that you have offered to our community, and we will continue to appreciate the pride that you have in our municipality and the work that you've done on our behalf. Thank you very much. Any comments from council? Oh, Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you, I feel just the need to say thank you again. I know on our behalf you have. I grew up in this community, and I think the individual you were referencing who commented on the crosswalk image was a very, very close friend of mine growing up, and I certainly saw firsthand what can happen when people aren't aware or aren't comfortable or are or not, in a way that he was very unsafe. I'll say that in our community at many times. And having spoken recently to youth in our community, there's certainly a really wonderful growth. And I really want to thank you and your group for leading that. It has made a difference for me. It has made a difference for so many other families. I also did want to mention that you have spoke about supporting ongoing training, and I know that the manager of strategic initiatives has a rainbow diversity training happening on June 14th. So I would really encourage folks that are curious or questioning, unsure, not sure always what to say or terminology, that would be a really wonderful opportunity to expand your allyship and to just think about how you could become someone who contributes to a more welcoming and inclusive community. So thank you for allowing me that.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, moving on to reports. I welcome Roxana Bauman, our staff person, to lead us through the discussion, and have the clerk read the motion before we begin, please.
Moved by Mike Kinchberg, seconded by Andrea Clark, that committee of the whole recommend that council approve the draft 2022 consolidated financial statements as presented.
Roxana, please.
Okay, thank you. So the purpose of the report, as you heard, is to have council approve the draft 2022 consolidated financial statements. The audit has been completed by our auditors, KPMG, primarily in March, and the majority of the fieldwork was conducted at that time. The consolidated financial statements are included as an attachment to this report, along with some variance reports that have been provided for additional context. Matt Beddick is here. He's a partner at KPMG, and he is here tonight to present the audit findings report to council. So I will pass it along to Matt.
Thanks, Roxana. So I'll take a few minutes to walk through our report. If there are questions as we go along, I'm happy to take them in real time, but also happy to take some questions at the conclusion. I'll skip ahead and talk about the status of our audit. So we are nearly complete. The statements do require approval from council to be finalized, and at which point we will produce our auditor's report thereon. In the draft financial statements that are included in your agenda materials is our proposed audit report. It is a clean audit opinion, so there's no qualifications or modifications. And as we go through this presentation, I'll highlight a few things that I think council should take away from my presentation, specifically as it relates to that. And there are a few things. The first is the clean audit opinion. So I'll park that one for now and come back to it later. We are required under professional standards to discuss with this committee the concept of materiality in the audit. And what materiality does is two things. It sets forth the scoping and extent of testing that we perform when we're looking at the accounting records. It also sets forth the limit by which we could accept any uncorrected misstatements in the financial statements and still issue a clean audit opinion. We set that materiality at $750,000, which is approximately 2% of total revenues and a little bit more than 2% of total expenses. The audit standards require that we set this anywhere between 0.5% and 3%. So we're somewhere in the middle. I often get questions about materiality, that it's a big number, 750,000. Clearly, you manage the operations of the municipality at a much more detailed level than that. But from the financial statements perspective, one would ask one, if your revenues or expenses were higher or lower by $750,000, would somebody, well, I'll pause. Sorry. I'm used to clearing a room. Go ahead. Somebody looking at your financial statements might come to the same conclusion as to the size and scope of your operations. We do look at any potential errors that we found at a much more granular level than that, so rest assured that that's not a final number. The next several pages, we are disclosing significant components of the audit and some required disclosures as well. So the first thing we're required to talk about is the risk of fraud in the audit. And when we talk about a risk of fraud, we talk about the intentional manipulation of the accounts. We're not talking necessarily about how the municipality may be a victim of outside fraud from an outside perpetrator. We are required to consider this from how internal controls may be overridden, regardless of how good any internal control structure might be. We have specific responses, and I'm happy to say that we didn't find any issues or concerns. Next item we looked at were post-employment benefits. So these are health and dental benefits that are offered to early retirees in the municipality once they leave employment. This does require the complex calculation from a third-party actuary, and there are a number of significant assumptions and other data points in there. The work that is performed by the third-party actuary, we do review, but we do rely on it. We also make sure that the assumptions and the underlying data that they use is accurate. The next thing I'll talk about is tangible capital assets. And so this is the largest single item on the municipality's financial statements and represents all of the capital that you've accumulated and continue to use. So from land, bridges, buildings, vehicles, water and sewer and wastewater assets and the like. Because this is so significant, we do want to make sure that the items recorded as capital are appropriate. We test a sample of items that were recorded to make sure they are capital in nature. And we also test the depreciation expense. No issues or items were identified. We look at the obligatory reserve funds and specifically the development charge revenue. The reason we look at this is because there's a bit of a mismatch in how you record this revenue in your financial statements versus when you receive it. The rules require that you only show this as revenue in the statements when you spend the underlying money. So there's a bit of a money coming in, it gets parked in the DC reserve fund, and then it leaves over time as those expenditures are made. So we do test those inflows and outflows, and when there are outflows, we want to make sure that those are connected to development-related projects in accordance with the Development Charges Act. We also look at the liabilities for solid waste or landfill and solid waste closure costs. So the rules require that the municipality record a liability in your financial statements for the eventual closure of the landfill site and the ongoing monitoring that's required under the MOE standards. That again requires significant estimates and assumptions, and we've looked at the underlying data and we're happy with the eventual outcome. I want to just bring to your attention quickly that there is a new accounting standard for next year that will impact how this liability is measured and calculated and likely will cause it to go up. Here, the last thing I'll talk about is the transfer of assets to Bruce Telecom. Just reminding council that at the beginning of the year, certain real estate assets were transferred to Bruce Telecom. And so we did look at that transaction from both the municipality's perspective to make sure that those were recorded properly, but also equally on the financial statements of Bruce Telecom, for which, by the way, I am the lead audit partner for as well. So I have able to see that transaction from both sides. It was recorded on a book value basis, so there are no gains or losses recorded in the municipality's financial statements, but we do recognize that the amount that they were transferred at was not their fair value. Second last thing I'm going to say is corrected and uncorrected amounts. So we are required to report if there are any corrected or uncorrected amounts in the financial statements, and I'm happy to say there are none. And lastly, we're required to disclose if we identify any significant control deficiencies. And again, we identified none. As I said earlier, we're looking at a clean audit opinion, no corrections to the statements, and no control deficiencies. So that's sort of the trifecta of good news from the auditor's perspective. There are a few other disclosures and appendices, which I won't go through in detail, but I'll have an opportunity now to take questions or comments from the committee.
Any questions or comments from council before we hand it back to our auditors for continued stimulating conversation? I promise we won't leave. I promise. Okay. There will be questions, but if you carry on and we'll
just in closing, I want to thank Roxana and Shelby and the rest of their team. We got great cooperation through the audit, and we're happy to continue to work with them. So,
okay. Well, there's got to be at least one question. If you don't, I do. So who wants to start? Okay. From the council perspective, our role is oversight. Roxana provides exemplary financial skills, and we are delighted to have her here to keep us in line and all that. But are there policies? Do you go into the policies that we use to help direct or manage or provide oversight to our financial department here? Or, what I'm thinking specifically are, though I'm going to suggest it's not going to be any, but are there policies that we would institute as best practice to provide capable oversight? You know, most of us have an inkling of finances, but we're not in depth, certainly as our financial services. Are there policies that we might implement that would help us provide that oversight and the bigger picture of our finances?
So as part of our audit, we do look at certain of the municipalities' policies, procurement being one, and there is a procurement bylaw in place, and it seems to be working well. Although we do not test the overall effectiveness of that bylaw. We do look at a number of your HR policies, especially as it relates to onboarding and offboarding members of the municipality. And we do test that as part of our work. We look to see that as new hires come on, they go through certain steps. And if there are terminations, they go through certain steps as well. In terms of other practices, I would suggest, and I believe this is happening, you know, whether it be quarterly or every 4 months sort of report to council of the overall financial picture and health of the municipality would be a best practice.
Any other questions? Councillor Stewart, please.
What's our surplus for 2022? Thank you.
Sorry, could you repeat that, please, Councillor Stewart? There's a lot of.
Yes, through you.
Thank you.
What's our surplus in 2022?
So the surplus reported for accounting purposes is approximately 9.6 million. But that needs to be understood in context, that is calculated in a way that's significantly different than that would be from a budgetary surplus. That surplus does not include capital purchases. It does not include payments for debt. It does not include transfers in and out of reserves, but it does include an amortization expense on those capital items. Roxanne?
Through you, Chair, I'd just like to add that in the staff report, we had calculated the operating surplus, that would be the budgetary operating surplus, to be 677,000.
So one of the prevailing financial threats that any municipality faces anymore is that of cyber attacks. And I'm wondering if you could offer some insight into what you see within the municipal sector. Our CAO is working with our county to upgrade, you know, the application of our security. But could you just give us a broad oversight on what you see in that, please?
Sure. So we're seeing two things. There's the ransomware attacks that several municipalities across the province have been subject to, where somebody comes in and takes over the network and demands payment in order to restore services or restore the systems. You know, we're seeing there are defenses against that. You know, appropriate backups that are tested frequently, workarounds. We're also seeing best practice of we call them fire drills. What would happen if that happens? And there are firms out there that will come and do what they refer to as penetration testing. The other one we do see quite a lot of is impersonation. And that's where somebody, usually the CAO or maybe the mayor, appears to send an email message to somebody in finance and says, oh, we have to transfer $50,000 to this vendor right away, no delays. And it's incredible. The email addresses look right. They know the names. They have an extensive amount of information. And we do see entities fall victim to this because the message appears to be coming from a position of authority. And so the best defenses against that are to follow your processes. And if anybody ever catches wind that they feel like it is, pick up the telephone, walk down the hall, and wait. In the municipal sector, I've never heard of any situation where a payment was so permanently necessary, imminently necessary, that it had to be done right away. We're seeing greater amounts of sophistication to with entities that are pretending to be vendors and changing the banking direction where you're doing electronic fund transfer. So they will contact you and say, hey, I'm from KPMG. Don't send your money to this bank account anymore. Send it to that bank account. And they dutifully go in and change the vendor information, and then all the payments just go. And in those situations, sometimes takes weeks or months to figure out that you're actually paying the wrong vendor. So again, making sure there are practices in place to identify that. Direct calls, telephone calls to confirm when that's happened is the best practice there so far. So those are the three main things that we're seeing.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you through you, Mayor. Thank you for coming tonight. We've been briefed by a Director of Corporate Services about this before, and you've mentioned it several times in your report about changes in progress are coming regarding asset retirement obligations.
Yes.
And I wonder if you could just like verbally kind of summarize the key points and what it means and why it matters to us from your report. Thanks.
Sure. So the asset retirement obligation is required for the 2003 financial statement, so the one coming up. And it does require where there is an obligation, whether it be legal or otherwise, that the municipality has to retire an asset, so take it out of service. And when that obligation exists, you're required to estimate what that cost will be and record it in your financial statements. The most common, we call them AROs, that a municipality might have would fall into two buckets. A, if you have buildings that you own that have asbestos, that asbestos is required to be removed prior to any renovation or alteration of that property. And so that would need to be identified, estimated, and recorded. Second, and this is a little bit less frequent, if you do lease buildings or lease land, you may be required to restore that land or that building to its original state at the end of the lease. That is also an asset retirement obligation. So these will be recorded in your financial statements to provide additional transparency as to what costs are coming down the pipe. Where it might be effective in terms of management of the municipality would be really the inventorying and identification of what those things are. There may be sort of an ad hoc or sort of a hodgepodge list of things that are coming up coming down the line in terms of expenses. This will help to formalize some of those things.
All right. Thank you very much for providing that overview and the detailed analysis of corporate services. And we look forward to receiving the final report.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor that we approve the draft 2022 consolidated financial statements as presented. All in favor of that? Anyone opposed? That's carried. Thank you. So we move on to our governance review, and oh, there's Chris online. Good for him. Welcome. Clerk, please, could you begin by reading the motion, please?
Moved by Rory Kavanagh, seconded by Doug Kennedy, that the committee of the whole recommend that council receive the governance review final report. And further, that council direct staff to bring back the draft procedure bylaw for review and a proposed timeline for implementation.
All right, we welcome this evening Chris Loretto, and is it you that's going to support him, or Jennifer, who's
Jennifer's report.
Jennifer's report? Okay. All right. How would you like you to begin? Okay, Jennifer, please.
Through you, Chris and I had the conversation this afternoon that council has seen this report a couple of times now. And so Chris is really here just to answer any questions that you might have. And we'll go from there. He doesn't have a formal presentation tonight, but if you have any questions for him.
So we've seen this draft report of the governance review, and obviously the motion tonight is to move that along to approve the final report and direct staff to begin the implementation of that by bringing forward a draft procedure bylaw for our consideration. Our clerk was commenting that it was 2003, I believe, 2013, when the present procedure bylaw was implemented, and the changes, though the outcome will be much the same, the language, the flow of things will have a significantly updated style to it. So are there any questions that you would have for Chris or our clerk to help you make a decision about whether to approve the final report of our governance review? Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you. The only one that I want to touch on just for maybe a bit of clarity is there's a recommendation that we move to 2 meetings a month. And it mentions getting rid of the planning meeting. And so I just kind of wanted to know what that might look like. In looking at some other municipalities, they tend to create committee of adjustment or a planning committee that does the public planning meetings at a different time. And then they just come with a final recommendation to council. Is that what's planned, or are we going to be hosting 2 meetings a month that involve committee of adjustments, public planning meeting, planning, and council? Is that kind of what the intent is?
To the clerk, please.
Through you, Mayor, the intent is to have 2 meetings a month, and that council would be able to host planning meetings and committee of adjustment meetings. This is also to aid in speeding up decision making on some of these items. So that is the intent.
One of the items that I believe I read in the final report was also about the inevitable necessity of delegating authority to staff to complete tasks without council having to vote on every single sort of thing. I can envision that we will be slowly implementing some of those recommendations as we see that, as we continue to look at our municipality from a higher and higher elevation, that not that the issues are any less important, but council's focus might be more accurately directed on some bigger picture issues. So when we get to a meeting that goes past 1:30 in the morning, we'll be happy to say to staff, no, just go ahead and do that. Councillor Kennedy, do you have a comment, please?
Yeah, I've got a long list actually, but I won't get into that. I'm a little worried about, the 9 months that we've missed out with some committees that some ongoing things, and there's some, there is some disappointment from some committee members, long-serving committee members in the public. So, being a volunteer most of my life, I kind of relate to what they're going through right now. I'm a little worried about a lot of good ideas that came out of, some of those committees that I'm not sure if we're interested in keeping going. And, I do like, a lot of things that are in this, but I'm worried about a few things and our community getting input into a lot of little things that I'm scared we're going to miss out on. And I'm not against change, but I just want to be sure that we're going in the right direction with some of these things. It's got a few notes here, but I just
Can we is
sorry.
that on committees, Councillor Kennedy?
yeah,
Or
it's about committees, just a couple more things.
okay,
That's
yeah,
it.
no, I just,
Nothing,
if it was a different topic, we would respond to the committees
sure.
and then come back. But if it's if it's about committees, carry
Yeah.
on, please.
Like all the people, great people, I've been on committees in this municipality for 35 years. They want to make a difference on that committee in our municipality and voices, and they aren't there just for one thing. The majority of them, they're out for the betterment of our community. And I'm just a little worried about this structure if we're going to get that. And anyways, I've got a couple more questions about something else. If you could answer that first, please. Thanks.
So perhaps we'll start with our clerk, and then whether you need Chris to add his understanding, that would be beneficial too. Clerk, please.
So I think in my reading of the report as well is not to eliminate committees, but to more laser focused committees. So to have committees that council requires recommendations from. And I think what we've seen in previous terms of council is that committees didn't have clear mandates and didn't have clear timelines. And so what would happen is they would have these great ideas, but that's not what council was looking for at the time. So council wasn't able to move those ideas forward. Whereas I think now it's more the committees are being struck by council when they need them, when they want them, and they're very laser focused. What ideas do we need? And maybe Chris, if you want to comment on that as well.
Yeah, that's precisely the case, Madam Clerk, through you, your worship. Nothing in here limits your flexibility to appoint committees, but to the clerk's point, it really is making sure that there is direction and discipline around this table around, you know, what we set a committee up to do, what questions or issues we're looking for them to tackle, what their relationship is with us, and how does it advance what we have agreed to our either operational priorities or strategic priorities of the municipality. And I think that will lead to a better volunteer experience, because then they can see tangibly how their input is actually helping the municipality advance its priorities, and hopefully we'll see more tangible outcomes to their participation. That's what the intent is, as opposed to, and we heard this from some of the volunteers and past chairs that we spoke to through our process, which was, you know, we were set up, we thought council wanted us to do this, and or we went in this direction. It was really disappointing when we couldn't get attention, or council didn't really want to take up the work that we were doing. And that's not because council was being willful in not listening to the committee, but the things just, you know, what the committee thought was important, what council was focused on and had a focus on in terms of priorities, just weren't matching up. And so the intent here is to really have a process to ensure that the committees you strike are working, are not working at cross purposes with what you're trying to achieve at this table. In fact, they're useful committees in terms of advancing what this table is trying to do on behalf of the community.
CAO, please.
Thank you through you, your worship. I also think that this structure provides us to maybe a little more easily go out to the community when there's an opportunity to do something a little less formally. So that structure of a working group is different than a committee structure, and that might make it easier for us to really grab onto the knowledge and expertise of a certain group of people in our community to help move certain items forward. And to Councillor Kennedy's point, I do agree that there's been a lot of tremendous work that volunteers in the community have done and provided, and helping to get different action plans in place. And some of what we see that we need to work on is actual implementation of those plans. So a lot of really great work has happened, and we want to make sure we are able to move that along, as well as providing various mechanisms to involve the public through volunteers in the future.
Your worship, could I add one more thing?
Yep.
Part of the, sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to ask Chris to comment on that, please.
I was just going to say, in addition, you know, one of the other recommendations is that we're recommending a continuous intake process for people who are interested in serving on committees, and that through kind of a more transparent process, that the striking committee is better able to match task to talent based on people's interest and what committee work is coming up. And so I think that'll, you know, hopefully incent, more people to want to throw their hat in the ring to serve on the committees that council will strike from time to time.
There certainly is a increasing desire to commit time to a project for a specified length of time. I'll do that for that, but then I'm done, because that's the time frame. I don't want to just be on it for 4 years just because I'm on it. So Councillor Kennedy, you have more questions, please.
Yeah, just a comment about committees, and maybe they could help get our numbers up of input of things that we seem to get 300, 400, 500 responses. I think somehow we've got to find a way to at least double that, you know, before council can make a really good take the opinion of people. We're just not close enough for me. And I've said that for 2 terms. I know Councillor Hinsberger said that too, but but I just think that's really important. A question about the 2 meetings a month. Am I allowed to do that? Could they start at 4 o'clock? Just a question.
we will have that conversation before we implement any changes. Absolutely. Any other questions regarding the approval of the final report? Or the vote, not the approval, the vote on it? All right, so we have a motion that was moved by Rory and Doug that council receive the governance review final report and that we direct staff to bring back the draft procedure bylaw for review, which would include start times and procedure, obviously, and a proposed timeline for the implementation of that bylaw. So all in favor of the motion? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. C, proposed changes to the community investment grant. Chris, thank you for your contribution this evening and the work you've done on that governance review. I know that there were a number of us, me included, that was like, I wonder what this is going to look like, but it has been a valuable conversation tool. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and all the best to you and council. And I'll check in a few months' time, see how things are going. Take care.
One meeting a month. There we go. We're going to change. Proposed changes to the community investment grant legislative services. Clerk, please.
That committee of the whole recommend that council pass a bylaw at the June 19th, 2023 council meeting to adopt the updated community investment grant policy, including the application form and statement of accountability.
For the motion and any discussion, would you like to start with this, or Deputy Mayor, do you want to start? Where does the conversation start on this one? You are, I'm sorry, you're the chair of community investment? There is no chair.
There's no chair.
Okay, how, a
It's
team?
team.
How, okay, as a member of the team, how about you comment on this?
I think the thought process for this was trying to create some equity with regards to initially minor sports. So it is formula based. The division in relation to the funding. And I think there was a bit of we wanted to ensure that other sport organizations outside of hockey, which had, I guess, the lion's share because of the number of participants, had an increase in the amount of funding that was attributed to them. However, we wanted to do so in a method which didn't which still allowed for some degree of certainty when the organizations were planning for the following year in terms of setting their registration fees. So they know that it's based upon a formula they can calculate by the number of the participants as to what they were going to be receiving. We wanted to ensure they had a degree of certainty because they would have to adjust fees accordingly. And I think with playing around with some numbers, the certainly number one identifies, I think, the best that we could do. And the way that the process works at the moment is that there's no organization that can get more than 50% of the allocated funds. So I think that's it. We wanted to try and create some equity. I don't know if Councillor Kennedy may have some more to add.
Councillor Kennedy, please.
Okay, through the chair. Just, some of the sports get a little more money because it's facility costs, right, too, with hours and participants. The formula that's been there, I guess, a long time. I don't know, but we tried to shift some money, more money to youth, to spread out amongst those groups. And I think that was a kind of a goal once the conversation started, to maybe not guarantee some different money that's guaranteed to groups every year, to go with that year to year, to see if how their operations are going, and to see if there's other groups out there that need money that we could add to this list. I think that's always been open to other groups. So I know we tried to be as fair as we could be to everybody that applied, and this big change is for the youth of our community, getting them playing whatever sports they play, make it more affordable, and anyways, that's how I feel about it. So thanks.
Just to add to that, even though the significant changes to the minor sports funding, like the community investment grants, reach a whole broad spectrum of involvement. It's not just sports, there's arts and there's therapies and there's all sorts of things. Deputy Mayor, you had another comment, please.
I did. I should be declaring a pecuniary interest in this. I sit on the board of directors for the Blues Festival. So I'll sit away from the table.
There any more comments? Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you, my background is in grant writing, and it's kind of where I have spent a lot of my time. So I certainly have a lot of thoughts about our granting programs and how they connect to each other. Recognizing that that has been in place for a long time, and that any transition in our process should be slow and steady to, as Deputy Mayor Clark said previously, in order to give folks certainty. I think I have two comments. One is that we have been funding the Kincardine Community Fund for quite a while now, and it's granting at least $2,500 a year. One of my recommendations would be to reduce the criteria for our community investment grant program to specifically nonprofit groups, and to exclude charitable organizations, because they are already eligible for the community fund, Kincardine Community Fund, where nonprofits are not. So some groups have applied to both in the past, and I think we should really be clarifying, again, especially if we're wanting to try to make the biggest impact with the small amount of funding that we have. Maybe I'll leave it there if anyone has any comments on that first.
That, to me, correct me if I'm wrong here, that sounds as though there's a significant impact on some of the applicants to our community investment grants if you limit it to nonprofits versus charitables. And not that it shouldn't be considered, that's not the point, but if we're going to make a substantial change like that, as well as the which is different than the funding arrangement for minor sports groups, for me, that would need to be clarified in a more substantial report before we would pass this, even though we're looking at 2 weeks to do that. So if you'd like to proceed with that suggestion, Councillor, then I'm gonna defer to our clerk and say, can we get some more information on what that would look like before? Is that too onerous a time frame to, like what does that mean? I don't know the extent of the applicants that would not be eligible any longer. I don't know what it means to the rest of the funding for the rest of the organization. So I would just want to be clear on that before we passed it. So the timeline for the 19th is still okay, even with any of these amendments proposed?
Through you, Chair, I think we'd want to take it back as well to the committee so that the committee can review it. The team can review it. We'd want to take it back to them to find out what that implication is. So it really would be depending on how much we're being asked to bring back, because I think just bringing it back you would want it in a more fulsome manner than just bringing the bylaw back. You might want to have another discussion about it. So long story short, maybe. So
what would the wish of council be to table this motion until we get another report back from Legislative Services and the striking team? What's your direction, Councillor Hinchberger, please?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. It's a question it's related. Before I would answer in here is, so we've dispersed or committed already the 2023 community investment grants. So timing wise, there's not a time pressure to resolve this imminently, correct?
No, incorrect. If you would, please.
Through you, Mayor, the only thing we would say is that groups will be gearing up for next year for events. I'm thinking of many events planned on a year-to-year basis. So if they are not even allowed to apply for this grant, I think we'd want to let them know as soon as possible because there might be other grants out there that they would apply for.
Councillor Kennedy, hockey registration started when? I'm gonna guess that they're already going
Yeah,
or
like
done.
most are doing right now, yeah.
Yeah,
for sure.
so like the,
President of KMHA is sitting right over there.
may I defer to staff? When did hockey registration start or when did they conclude?
So the early.
So I think the thing is, we don't have a long time to defer. Like if it was back in a month would be a good time frame to suggest, if that's okay. CAO, please.
But could I, through you, Mayor, if I just want to confirm perhaps Councillor Blackwell's recommendation related to the consideration, you're recommending adjusting the eligibility criteria? Yes.
Yes.
Councillor Blackwell, sorry. Yep.
Sorry, yeah. Yes, I would look, well, and it depends. I would think mostly on my initial review, and again, it would be something that I think that the committee could look at, and it doesn't need to be this year, but it would be something that I would want to consider because we are funding two separate granting programs that have different criteria. So ensuring that we're asking people to apply for the granting criteria that best meets their needs, I think would be something that I would want to look at.
Councillor Kennedy.
Through the chair, being on both committees, the Community Investment Grant and the Community Fund, I have seen the same groups apply for both groups as Councillor Blackwell is saying, correct? Yeah. Yep. So it would be good to maybe adjust those policies. Anyways.
To our clerk, please.
Through you, Chair. One thing, we did have a conversation with the Grey Bruce Community Foundation, who provides the granting through our fund. And the one thing that we could do is move the granting to the fall so that the Community Investment Grant team would know who received a Grey Bruce Community Foundation fund grant before they made decisions on the other funds.
So even though we are kind of in principle supporting this idea of addressing the funding formulas for minor sports, there's been a much larger conversation birthed out of this. So I think what I heard from council is that we're able to defer this motion for 1 month. It would come back the first meeting in July with a recommendation from the striking team and our legislative services regarding application criteria and funding amounts and all those sorts of things. Is that all in favor of that direction, please? Oh, we need a mover and seconder. Councillor Kavanaugh and Councillor Prenger. Thank you. All in favor of that direction? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. Okay, Queen Street reconstruction, borrowing, financial services. I'll read this motion for you, or do you have the motion there? Okay, clerk, please.
This is moved by Jennifer Prenger, seconded by Mike Hinchberger, that authorization be given to obtain $4,556,500 debenture from Ontario Infrastructure and Lands Corporation for long-term financing repayment terms of 20 years to finance the Queen Street Sewer Main project, and that authorization be given to the treasurer to sign any necessary and related documents, and further that council approve the attached borrowing bylaw.
Roxana, please.
Through you, Chair. So I don't have much more to add other than what's already in the report. Just to provide some further information that the request is to submit the application for the borrowing bylaw. So that's the first part of the process for being able to obtain debt financing. And then the second part would be actually passing the debenture bylaw when the project is near substantial completion. As council will recall, that would have been the first bylaw you would have seen in your new term of council for the previous project that we had that was significant. So that debenture bylaw will then come forward closer to fall when this project is substantially complete as well. So we're just requesting approval to be able to execute the necessary documents in order to submit the application to Infrastructure Ontario.
There was quite a lot of information came in the report. Are there any questions from council regarding this proposal? Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you. Through you, it's not necessarily so much about this proposal, which I support. I just wanted a little bit of clarity on page 2 of the report. It looks at the funding sources for the various elements of this project, and the business support program and the streetscape both look like they're being funded from the life cycle reserve. The business support program, at least in my opinion, and I will certainly defer to our treasurer, seems much more like an operating expense or a contingency expense rather than something potentially from the life cycle reserve. I'm just wondering perhaps what the thought process is there.
Okay, through you, Chair. So the way this was budgeted was originally the entire amount would have been funded either through the reserve funds or through debt. And when we break down the cost further, we can see that some of them would be best supported, like you said, through operating or through a different reserve fund or not through borrowing. In this particular case, if you would have wanted to pay for the business program support in the streetscape through the operating budget, that would have required a tax rate increase of just over 1%. So that's why the proposal is to not borrow those funds, but instead just take them from the life cycle reserve fund.
You've heard the motion. All in favor? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. County council update. Did I miss something? Oh, the limiting distance agreement thing. I'm missing bigger and bigger chunks all the time here. So we have a limiting distance agreement for 61 Inverness Street North. And this, there's a motion from the clerk.
Moved by Andrea Clark, seconded by Rory Kavanagh, that committee of the whole recommend that council pass a bylaw to enter into a limiting distance agreement with the owner of Westridge on Lake, Angelo Orzi, pursuant to 9.10.15.2, Section 4 of the Ontario Building Code 2012, and further that council authorizes the mayor and clerk to execute all required documentation on behalf of the municipality.
Director McNabb, would you like to talk about this?
Sure, through you, Chair. Yes, this agreement is like it says, just in addition to the zoning provisions. Westridge on the Lake there, that you do have a specific zoning in place, which allows for a fairly reduced side yard setback. When checking that though, we need to check with the design itself, and this is where the glazed openings would require a further setback. Typically, through the building code, you're looking about 7% glazed openings at a 1.2 meter setback. We're up around 16.5, 16.8. So it requires that living distance be implemented. In this case, we were able to do so because we do own the parkland beside this parcel, and that's been transferred through us through the development agreement. So we're able to enter into that agreement. I think it's reasonable for this council to do so.
So basically, the narrower the side yard, the less glass you can have.
Through you, that's correct.
All right. Any questions to confirm what's going on? Councillor Hinchberger.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. It's actually seeing the terrific report, by the way. Love the attachments. When I looked at the elevation, it looks like the proposed structure on lot 8 and 7 are basically mirror images of each other. So should we be expecting to see in the future something similar related to lot 7 and lot 6?
Through you, Mayor. Councillor Hinchberger, those elevations are the same building.
Oh, there,
Sorry, they're just a different.
oh, no,
facade.
actually, it wasn't the elevation I was looking at. It's
Okay.
the site plan, site reference plan. Where if you notice that
Yes.
the driveways essentially butt next to each other. At this point, I don't need to go into this
That's
further in here.
fine.
We could take this
That's fine,
offline.
yeah.
Thanks.
Mr. McNabb commented it's been like 42 years since he saw his last limiting distance agreement. They're not particularly common, but as lots become narrower, they will become more common. So we've heard the motion. All in favor of passing this? Anyone opposed? And that's carried. All right, County Council update. I had sent out an email regarding our some of the highlights at County Council, and just like to comment about the community paramedicine program that the council uses. County paramedics have 3 Teslas that they have on the road visiting. In the last couple of years, they've visited 7,000 plus candidates for long-term care placement or palliative patients. The Teslas cost about $7 a day, they estimate, for electric charge. And it's been an enormous benefit both to the community and to, you know, the progression of the electrical vehicles in our community. I'm not doing this just because Mike told me to. It's actually a good thing. Anyway, so the county, like we think of the paramedics as driving ambulances, but they've picked up a lot of services that VON and Care Partners used to do, and they're doing an exceptional job. So just a shout out to Steve Schaus and his team at Bruce County for that. All right, we have a consent agenda here. The items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine and are enacted in one motion as a matter arising when we get back in council, unless, of course, there are any reports that council members would like to either comment on now or ask somehow or other that staff provide some more information in an upcoming meeting. Councillor Kennedy, please.
Yeah, through the chair, you got to get the right number here, Doug. I've got I can't vote on the Rock the Docks noise bylaw. I'll fill out paperwork. Sorry, there you go. Declaration. I couldn't find that word. It was there.
Councillor Hinchberger, please.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. This could be addressed just by a quick question. It had to do with the agenda item about from the minutes of the multi-municipal wind turbine working group, which looks like it's evolving into something with a broader scope, multi-municipal energy working group. And I just wanted to confirm that the municipality of Kincardine is or is not currently a member of that group. I think the answer is we are not, but I want just to confirm that.
Through you, Mayor, and the manager of legislative services can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have been in the past, and in the future that would be up for consideration.
Anything else from the consent agenda? All right, clerk, we have a motion, please. Oh. No.
Moved by Doug Kennedy, seconded by Beth Blackwell, that this committee of the whole adjourn at 6:22 PM.
All in favor? And that's carried. Ten point one, matters arising from committee of the whole, our consent agenda. Clerk, please.
This is moved by Doug Kennedy, seconded by Jennifer Prenger, that council approve the recommendations contained in the consent agenda dated June 5th, 2023, and direct staff to proceed with all necessary administrative actions.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? That's carried. 2022 consolidated financial statements.
This is moved by Mike Hinchberger, seconded by Andrea Clark, that council approve the draft 2022 consolidated financial statements as presented.
For the motion, any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Governance review, final report.
Moved by Rory Kavanaugh, seconded by Amanda Stein, oh, no, not Amanda Stein, Bray. Seconded by Doug Kennedy. That council receive the governance review final report, and further that council direct staff to bring back the draft procedure bylaw for review and a proposed timeline for implementation.
You've heard the to receive the amended. No, was this the one where you changed the name of it? Oh, that's a different,
That was
the con, oh, that was already done. Council received the governance review. All in favor of that one? And that's carried. Queen Street Long-Term Financing 2023 bylaw, please.
This is moved by Doug Kennedy, seconded by Beth Blackwell, that the Queen Street Long-Term Financing 2023 bylaw be deemed to read a first, second, and third time finally passed, numbered as bylaw 2023-088.
For the motion, any discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Limiting distance agreement. Clerk, please.
Moved by Beth Blackwell, seconded by Jennifer Prenger, that the limiting distance agreement 61 Inverness Street North bylaw be deemed to read a first, second, and third time finally passed, numbered as bylaw 2023-089.
All in favor? And that's carried. General announcements. We'll start online. Councillor Blackwell, please.
Thank you through you. I'm not sure yet if folks have seen the news, but Mrs. Boucher's class at Huron Heights has won one of 5 Rick Hansen Awards for Inclusion and Difference Makers of the Year. So they are going to be feted by Rick Hansen Foundation towards the end of this month, but they were recognized for their work looking at their own school and considering how it could become more welcoming and accessible for folks of all ability. So I thought they deserved some additional recognition locally.
Councillor Stewart, do you have any announcements this evening?
No.
Councillor Hinchberger?
Thank you through your mayor. I had the opportunity on the weekend to sell drink tickets at the Hoedown Throwdown, that I think I got that right, or Throwdown Hoedown, run by the Kincardine Agricultural Society at the Davidson Center. I'd have to say that for the time I was there, it was quite the experience, and I think it falls in that category of innovative thinking in terms of to expand awareness and or raise money and think of new ideas. So I just like to commend them on that.
Councillor Prenger?
Thank you through your chair. The Kincardine Lions Club had their annual garage sale this weekend, and it was a huge success. And not just financially, although I can't officially say how much, or I can't officially say that it was a record number that they pulled in, but I believe it might have been. But it was also a success in terms of the community coming together. So drop off started at a certain time in the morning, and it filled up so quickly that community members who were just there in theory to drop off their stuff started helping, because there was so much stuff to put out, and they helped the Lions Club set stuff out. And then the stuff that had been dropped off over the past year had to be put somewhere else because there was so much stuff, but they made amazing money, and it was a great day. So it was just really nice to see the community come together, and so many people benefit from such a great activity, as well as future benefits the community will have from that money that was raised.
Councillor Kennedy?
Yes, through the chair, I went and watched the roller derby from the stands, and hey, listen, I'll tell you, it was really interesting. Well, you could tell how well organized it was from the stands, and that's not surprising. So to bring those sort of things, anything that's on the ice surface, is good in my books. But anyways, commend them. Sand, ice, roller derby, it doesn't matter. Jane might not say that in an arena. This is Kincardine's 175th birthday, this year. So that's something I was told last week, so that's a milestone for our municipality. And I'll tell you, out in the streets the last few weeks, I've heard so many good things about our nurse practitioner, and I want to pass that on to council. How well it's being received. I was there at meetings twice in the last week, and people lining up in those chairs, getting looked after, and takes the pressure off our hospital. And it's kudos to everybody around this table that supported that. Awesome. Thanks.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Speaking of things that to support our hospital, I just wanted to give a shout out to Rock With Your Docs, which is happening at the Davidson Center. Wonderful facility. That's June 17th, and it's a bunch of local bands coming together, and tickets are available. So come on out.
Deputy Mayor Clark.
No announcements.
CAO.
Just a couple of things. You will have seen lots of social media and communication online on our website about some of the events that are happening in June and further on into the fall as well. As was mentioned already, June is National Indigenous History Month, and we have partnered with the Walker House, and there are 3 exhibits from the Legacy of Hope around the residential school system and the impacts, and really something that I'm looking forward to participating in and looking at and working towards reconciliation is another step. Exhibits on display from May till September the 4th, both the Walker House and then later at the Welcome Center. On June the 9th, we are also offering a learning circle on the history of the land from a First Nations, Métis and Inuit perspective, but there is a registration that's required. So if you're available, then please get registered for that. On the 10th, we will be having a sunrise ceremony learning circle in Victoria Park, but it's at 9, so that'll be out. Okay, it'll change. It'll be at a different time. June the 10th, we've got from 11 to 4 in Victoria Park or the Kincardine Arts Center if it rains. There are some crafters and makers who are Indigenous people that will be selling beaded art, jewelry, apparel, prints, and more. And as many as was also already referenced, that lovely painting that's down by George Jeffrey. Nope, said that wrong. Jeffrey George, who's the artist of the 7 Generations Crosswalk, will be at the market selling his art. And as was noted earlier in this meeting, June is also Pride Month, and a tribute to those that were involved in the Stonewall riots in New York City. Kincardine Pride is excited to announce their 5th annual Pride Parade, and their celebrations are back. And there's also some training sessions that we're helping to partner with, and the public is welcome and invited to attend.
Clerk, please. Next motion.
Moved by Mike Hinchberger, seconded by Andrea Clark, that council move into closed meeting for the purpose of considering labor relations or employee negotiation, human resources policy manual pursuant to section 239(2)D of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, and upon completion return